Good morning everyone and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sean Courtney and I'm the Marketing and Communications Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Our webinar today, Office 365 Implementation Considerations, will be presented by Matt Walton, Senior IT Consultant at InfoExchange. And just a bit of housekeeping for today. If during the webinar you have a question, please type it in the question box on your webinar panel and we'll pause about halfway through to answer any questions. And we'll also aim to save a bit of time at the end to answer some questions then too. So that's all from me. I'd now like to hand over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that and welcome everyone. It's exciting to be able to talk to you about Office 365 today. As Sean said, I will allow for some questions at about half time and also at the end. But also my email address is on the front slide there. So if there's any sort of specific things that you really want to cover, feel free to contact me afterwards, or if there's anything that you really wanted to get out today that I skimmed over, feel free to contact me afterwards. We also will send the slides. So for those who are frantically getting their pens ready or ready to take notes, we will send through the slide deck, and also the webinar recording will be made publicly available if you want to share this with any of your colleagues or use that for any other purpose. So look, we'll get started. So really today is all about Office 365, obviously. So there are some other webinars that we're running through Connecting Up around introduction to Office 365, which does a bit of a demo about what applications are within Office 365. So that's more a high-level overview. We also have other webinars that are more detailed about some of the applications like SharePoint. But today's webinar is really around things that you need to think about if you're considering moving to Office 365. So it is quite a common move now in the not-for-profit sector since about 12 months ago, maybe even more now, where Microsoft started offering Office 365 for free, E1 licenses for free to eligible not-for-profits. And since then we've had all types and sizes of organisations moving to Office 365 and using that in lots of different ways. So we've had large organisations with thousands of staff to, small startup not-for-profits with 1 or 2 staff. So it is a very flexible system that can be used by a range of people. And as you can see there, so we're a not-for-profit and we help people in a range of different ways. So we do sort of full implementations, or we actually do just provide support and mentoring, or a bit of training and education like these webinars. So throughout that process, we've picked up a lot of tips and tricks around the best way to do this in the most cost-efficient way. Because we only work with not-for-profits, we know how to do it cheaply and easily and quickly. In a way that suits a lot of different organisations. So today is really about us sharing some of those tips and tricks, and we'll touch on quickly about what is Office 365 and some of the high-level benefits. We'll talk about privacy and security. That's often one of the concerns people have, so we'll go through that. And then we'll go into some detail about each of the applications and things you need to think about for each of those applications. So Exchange being email, SharePoint documents, intranet, those sort of things. And then we'll talk about mobility and building the business case. So I'm expecting that a large majority of you today are at the point where you're considering it, you've heard about it, you think it's a great idea, but you haven't quite got all the detail to be able to implement it. And usually one of the biggest and hardest steps is to be able to justify it to your management team or your board. So really that business case is key. And I'll try and give you some links to some other resources that you can go to after this. So what is Office 365? Now this is a very broad question, and we'll dig in a bit more detail, but basically it's a cloud-based system that has a range of applications. So it's Microsoft hosted. So right now, for all of you in Australia, it's based in Microsoft data centers in Sydney and Melbourne. And basically Microsoft look after all your servers and all the back end for you. So they've got a 99.9% SLA, which means they essentially guarantee that it will be up 99.9% of the time. And they constantly do those updates. So instead of having to bring it down for patching and regular maintenance, and you know, when you move from Exchange 2010 to Exchange 2013, you don't need to do that anymore. It's just always the latest version. So the box on the bottom there where it says Exchange, SharePoint and Lync, these are things that you used to have on servers in your data center or in your office. But now with Office 365, they're things that Office 365 hosts for you, Microsoft hosts for you, and you can just access it from any computer from anywhere. So that's really one of the key differences, as well as mobility. So back in the old days where you used to have to install SharePoint on your server, you often couldn't get it from home, or you couldn't get it from out on the road or on your smartphone. Nowadays it's designed to be able to, there's apps, and we'll talk about these a little bit later, but it means you can access from anywhere at any time, and it's more that flexible work style that nowadays people are on the road more, people are working from home, being more family friendly, and people want that redundancy. If your internet goes down, that you can go and work from the local McDonald's if you want to, or the library, or wherever it may be. So that's in a nutshell what Office 365 is. So this screen here, this is the full suite of Office 365, and it's constantly changing and growing. So some of these have just come on recently, and to be honest, I took this shot maybe a month ago, and there's possibly even another one that's not on there that Microsoft have introduced since. So it's just a suite of applications that you can choose what you use. So you don't have to use all of this. Some organizations we work with just use one of these things. They just use it for mail. Other organizations, they use the full suite, including some add-on things that you can sort of set up and pay for separately, like CRM. There's some more advanced things that we won't really cover today, but what it means is you've got one username and password for all of these applications, and they're all available through the one web portal. So this picture is actually the menu when you log into Office 365. This is what the menu looks like, and you can now just click in and access whichever application you choose to use at that time. So what is Office 365 in a bit more detail when we're talking about the E1 plan. So the E1 plan, why that's the best plan and why we almost always recommend it, is that it's free. So that is the free plan that Microsoft are offering to not-for-profits. So they actually have about, I think there's about 12 different plans at the moment. There's small business plans, there's academic plans, there's a range of different plans. But if you're a not-for-profit, particularly if you've got DGR status and you're a charity, you will, or you should be eligible for those E1 licenses. So what that gets you, it gets you 50 gig per user in a mailbox. So you can have as many mailboxes as you want. So we have clients with, over 1,000 mailboxes, and you get 50 gig in each of those mailboxes. So basically it's unlimited as far as the number of users. So that's Exchange Online. So mail, calendar, contacts, tasks. You also get instant messaging, video conferencing and screen sharing. So most of you would have heard for Skype. You get Skype for Business, which is a similar product. It used to be called Lync. but Microsoft bought out Skype, so now you get that, that a lot of organizations are getting some real great value out of implementing that. Each user also gets a terabyte of storage. Now, a terabyte is a lot of storage. We don't have any clients who have filled up either 1 terabyte or 50 gig at the moment. So it's not something that you know, you're ever going to need to buy more storage on, typically. So that's OneDrive. So every user gets a OneDrive account with a terabyte of storage, and you also get additional storage when you have a SharePoint site. So SharePoint is a tool that can be used for a range of things, but a lot of organizations are using it for document management and a company intranet where they use it for discussion and project sites and team sites and areas where you have shared information. The one thing that is also being very useful for a lot of clients, and we're running separate training sessions for this, is Yammer. Yammer is like Facebook for business. So Microsoft bought out Yammer. It used to be a standalone thing, but now it's a part of Office 365. Again, same username and password for all of these, and a lot of organizations are really getting into just having that online discussion, having groups for specific topics or specific areas within your organization, and really loving that collaborative working style. So that's, in summary, what you get with an E1 plan. There's also a link on one of the final slides, the resources slides, off to the full list on the Microsoft site that tells you exactly in detail what you get as part of that plan. So what you don't get as part of E1 that a lot of organizations need is Office. So the old style of Office that you buy from Connecting Up typically, and we still recommend that you do that for most cases, is that copy of Office where you get Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, all of those things. I think at the moment it's $56 and you buy it once per user or per PC, and you install that on the PC. So that is typically the most cost-effective way of getting Word and Excel on your PC. As you can see on that slide, you can use Word online, Excel online, PowerPoint online, which means you can write a Word document from any computer that has a web browser. But what we're finding is that most organizations still enjoy having that local copy installed on their PCs of Word and Outlook. The functionality is a little bit better on the desktop versions, and it allows you to work offline as well. So if the internet does go down, you can write a draft email or write a Word document and then send it later when the internet's connected again. The other option...
Apologies to interrupt there, Matt.
Yeah, sorry.
We just seem to be stuck on one of your intro slides, I think. Are you able to just double check, make sure we can flick through your slides?
Yep. So there should be an E1 plan there. Let me try again. All right, is that better?
Yep, that looks better, thanks. Looks like we're on the right one.
All right, I apologise for that, everyone, if that's if you missed some of that. So this was the slide I was referring to in regards to the all the different applications, and so Word, Excel, PowerPoint online, OneNote online, and what comes as part of the E1 plan. So the other plan that some of our clients are choosing to move towards is an E3 plan. So this is a paid plan, but that's at a charity price. So $6.38 per user per month is the charity price for an E3 plan. Now, This in the corporate world, I think, is about definitely over $20, maybe $30. So what you get with this plan, you actually get Office. So you get a copy of Office. So that copy that you bought for $56 from Connecting Up, you can get as part of this $6.38 per user per month. Now I'll leave it to you to do the maths of that, but $6.38 per user per month over 2 years is more than 56. But there are other benefits as well. So you actually get 5 devices. So you get Office to be able to install it on 5 devices. So for me, I have Office on a laptop. I have Office for Mac on my Mac at home. I have Office on my iPad that I use when I'm out and about. I have Office on my phone. So we'll talk about mobile later, but essentially I have 5 copies of Office running, and I can do that because I have an E3 plan at $6.38. So you can mix and match these as well. So some organisations, they have the majority of their users or their casuals using E1 plans, and they have their management staff that might have multiple devices use E3 plans. There are mobile apps, and the mobile apps that you get on the E3 plan are actually better than some of the other apps that you get on the E1, just more read-only style apps. Some of our organisations that are a bit more litigious or have sort of certain requirements under legislation or under contracts have what's called legal hold on their email, and E3 gives you that. So basically what that means is if I send an email and then I go and delete it out of my sent items, if I have an E1 plan, that email's gone. So there are recycle bins and a couple of things like that, but essentially if the organisation wants to track that email, they won't have much luck after about 30 days. What this does, legal hold, it basically stores a copy of all emails regardless of whether your staff delete them or not. So basically it keeps an archive for all emails in and out. So some organisations want to keep track of all the emails in and out in case they need to pull them up for a lawsuit in 6 years' time, for example. So that's something that some of you may consider. And E3 also has some more advanced searching and business intelligence tools. So we can come back to that if anyone's really interested in those detailed tools. But as I said, at the end I'll show you a link that shows you the detail of what you can get in E3 plans. All right, now a lot of people have just the perception of the cloud is that a lot of people have concerns about security and privacy. So you obviously hear some things about leaks and those sort of things, and storage in China and Russia and those type of countries which are a bit more open with their data. So what Microsoft have done just recently, they have moved their Office 365 applications to be hosted in Melbourne and Sydney. So all of you in Australia, if you go out and create a new Office 365 account, that will be based in Sydney. Now some of the people who have maybe created an account a couple of years ago may still be hosted in Singapore. They're gradually bringing them all across for the existing ones, but any new ones now will be in Melbourne and Sydney. Now, why that's important? For some organisations, they have contracts with state governments or organisations who say that you need your data hosted in Australia. Often that's client data, so it really depends what data you're storing on Office 365 and how important that is for you to have that in Melbourne and Sydney. But that is one thing now that Office 365 has on some other cloud-based systems that are still hosted in the US and other countries. All right. The other thing that gives some organisations comfort is that a lot of large organisations and governments are now using Office 365 also. So We do a lot of work with the Queensland Government, and they are on Office 365. Info Exchange are on Office 365. 90% of our clients, large and small, are on Office 365. So it is a very commonly accepted platform nowadays. And it does, when we've dug into the security and privacy controls that Microsoft have put in place around access to the data centers and redundancies and all these different certifications that they've gone and got around privacy, and they meet all these regulations. They've actually done a lot of work making sure that your data is secure and there aren't leaks, and that the right people can access your data. The other thing that is important to know from Microsoft, they've in Office 365, is that you own and retain all your rights to your data, and it is reasonably easy to move off if you choose to. So if in 12 months' time, after you've moved to Office 365, you change your mind, you can take all your data with you, and you retain all the rights to that, and Microsoft won't keep copies of that. So that's really important to consider. So what I might do, I might just pause here for a minute. What I'll do next is I'll go into each application. So I'll talk a bit about Exchange Online and SharePoint, but I might just pause for a couple of minutes and give the opportunity for any questions, particularly considering you might have missed a couple of those visuals on the slide. So if you can, Sean, any questions through the chat there?
Hi Matt. Yeah, we've had just a couple come through. So I've got one from John who asks, can we get offline backups monthly or weekly?
Yeah, and look, it depends what information you're backing up. There are, so basically when you're hosting, let's say your email, what Exchange Online is doing is it's really reducing the need for you to have those backups. And there are recycle bins and there are other things that you can do. But there are ways to have backups if you want them. They're more advanced and they're often additional third-party software that you need to install. Or there's a few different migration types like a hybrid, which allow you to store some information on your local Exchange server and some information on Office 365, and same with SharePoint. There are ways that you can do backups, yes, but it's often not just default out of the box. But we're finding that 90% of the organisations we work with choose not to bother backing up their Exchange when it's on Office 365 because Microsoft look after all of that behind the scenes.
Great, thanks Matt. Next question is from Solomon who asks, what's the lead time in retrieving a deleted document?
There are a couple of levels of deletions. So I think the initial one, just off the top of the head, is 30 days. But then there's also another sort of recycle bin where you can log a ticket with Microsoft, and I think that's 90 days, where they can actually get that for you. So I think overall, if someone deletes it, I think you actually have about 180 days to get an email back. However, if that's really important to you, yeah, as I said about E3, I would consider that legal hold, which allows you to get access at any time to anything that's been deleted.
Thanks, Matt. Next question is from Dave, who asks, are there any antivirus software as part of Office 365?
And antivirus, as far as on your PC, isn't part of Office 365, no. So we usually recommend a separate antivirus specific to each of your PCs. What Office 365 does do, it does things like for spam, for example, it has an inbuilt spam filter for your email. So a lot of people who used to pay licenses for spam filters no longer have to do that. but we always still recommend having antivirus installed on your PC, because a lot of what you do, so if you just do web browsing on your PC, that doesn't affect Office 365. So you need additional security to protect against some of those other viruses you might get when you're browsing the web, for example.
Thanks for that, Matt. And next question is just a bit more of a general one from Edward about what are your thoughts on Windows 10 and its integration with Office 365?
Yeah, with any new operating system or version of software that Microsoft release, we typically recommend that organisations wait a few months. So we're still on the brink at the moment. We've got some clients that are using it. We're about half and half internally here. We're doing a lot of testing, but haven't fully rolled out. So typically we're going to wait until January to roll that out to a lot of our clients and start recommending it. And the same with Office 2016. So what Windows 10 is good at is the more mobile and the touch screen. So we are having a lot of clients who are starting to be more mobile and have Surface Pros or iPads or whatever device they may be, starting to use apps or the Windows 10 interface to use Yammer and use OneNote. You know, you can write notes in OneNote and all those sort of things. So Windows 10 has been really designed for keeping Office 365 and the more mobile way of working in mind. So yeah, early next year we'll be recommending that everyone move to Windows 10.
Great, thanks Matt. And thanks for sending through those questions, guys. So I think happy to continue with the presentation if you are there, Matt.
Sure, I'll try and save some time at the end for some more questions. And as I said, we can get into more detail offline if anyone's not getting the answers they wanted. All right, so let's get into each application. As I said early on, there are a whole range of applications as part of Office 365. I might actually just flick back. Some of you probably didn't see this slide. This is the full suite. So this is what I was referring to before. When that's the full suite, that's the menu when you log into Office 365. They're all the different applications and that you get as part of your Office 365 plan. Now, some of those are add-ons, as I mentioned, CRM and Power BI, but for most of you, you will probably use a combination of most of these, but that's up to you. So what I will do now is go through the key ones. So Exchange Online. So you can get your calendars, contacts, and mail and tasks through the web browser in Exchange Online. So you can just log on to login.microsoftonline.com and read your mail and your calendars and contacts. You can get it on your phone and any device, and you can also, like the picture on the bottom right, you can also still use Outlook. So most of our clients, including myself, still love using Outlook installed on the desktop. So you can use this Exchange Online in a flexible way. So what we find is most organisations, the main reason a lot of them are moving to Office 365 is because they don't want to have an Exchange server in their office anymore. It just doesn't make financial sense or risk sense to be able to host that yourself when you can just move it to Office 365. So if you're moving to Exchange Online, some of the things you need to think about is what current infrastructure do you have? So how's your internet? What type of hardware do you have? What version of software? So do you have Office 2013 or 16, which we would recommend to do with to work well with Office 365? But if you've got Office 2007 still, you actually need to. We recommend that you upgrade that if you're planning on using Outlook for your email. So that's usually the first step, is to assess your requirements. We also have some appendices to these slides which talk about minimum specifications for each PC, what we recommend, and what versions of software and operating system we recommend that you have. So there was a Windows 10 question. We recommend that you don't use XP anymore. It's not supported. So minimum Windows 7, but again, if you're doing this next year, Windows 10 is probably the way to go. Review your current users. So often it's a good chance to clean up. There are different things that live in Exchange. So there's normal mailboxes, there's resource mailboxes like meeting rooms and cars and projectors and those sort of things. Distribution lists. A lot of you may still be using public folders for things like shared contacts. They're all the things that you need to consider and how you're going to bring them across into the new platform and set them up. And you obviously need to resource the technical and non-technical components. Now, unfortunately, it's not a really simple, easy process that everyone can do themselves to move from an Exchange server or from Gmail or from whatever you're on now. It usually does require some technical expertise to move you across smoothly and in a risk-free way. So the first question is, does your current IT contractor have expertise? So we're finding a lot of small contractors are starting to acknowledge that Office 365 is the way of the future, but a lot of them are still very specialist in Exchange, and that's what they know, and that's what they can do well. So that's something that you'll need to consider. And also the non-technical part is usually the bit that makes or breaks some of these is, do users have training? Do they know what's happening? Have you engaged the right people to work out what they want to use, how they want to set up the new system, and what they want to use it for? So there are some non-technical things that mean that if your organisation's considering moving, don't just leave it to the IT guy or the poor system admin that's going to have to do everything. It does need some management involvement for any sort of change, and this is one of those changes. So, factors to plan your email migration. So, the size. So the size is makes a big difference on how you migrate. So, unfortunately, there's not a one-size-fits-all for email migration. So to get the data from your current system to your Office 365, how we do it for a small two-person organisation that has PST files on their computers or the email is quite different and very manual. Compared to what we do for a 1,000-person organisation that has staff across the country and all using email in a different way. So that's usually the first thing that we ask is, okay, how many mailboxes do you have and where do they all live? I'll just flick through these. I'll bring these all up. So coexistence means, do you need to have both of your systems running at the same time, or can we just do a big cutover and on one night you're using your Exchange and then the next day you're using Office 365? If we can get away with that, that's often a simpler process. The source is, where is the mail coming from? If you've got an Exchange server, you would do a different type of migration to if you're using Gmail, for example. User provisioning. How are we going to get all these users into Office 365? So if it's, again, 3 users, you just put them in manually. If it's 1,000 users, you're probably going to use directory synchronization or some form of automation to get all those users into Office 365 and set them up. And identity management. So do you need integration with your local Active Directory so they've got the same username and password? Or can they just all be cloud users and they're not local in your Active Directory or based on your server? So these are all things you need to consider when you're planning what type of migration you're going to do. This slide is the list of different types of migrations. Now, it's not even all of them, to be honest, but it's the main ones. So as I said, if you're a small organization, the migration's pretty manual. You can do it reasonably easy just by exporting and importing PST files and doing it on the PC. So you might need your IT guy to go around to each PC and spend a bit of time doing that export and import process. Whereas on the other side, the hybrid deployment, it's quite technical and you need someone to set up several servers in your environment to be able to synchronize with your current Exchange server and synchronize that mail across. So if you're a large organization over 100 users, we typically recommend, and you've got servers, we typically recommend that type of migration, which means you can stage your migration and do a department at a time. So we've got a few of these on the go at the moment where, you know, the process might take over 12 months to migrate everyone across, and you can have some on Exchange and some on Office 365 while you're doing things like training and change management and setting it up correctly. So, and it might be that some parts of your organization are ready and some aren't. And there's also migration tools. So if none of these are suitable, this is where you need migration tools. So choosing one of these options is not a black and white science. It is something that you probably typically rely on your IT contractor or a third party to come in and give you some advice on this. I'll touch base at the end about a couple of things that we can do to help you decide this that are sort of quick and easy. All right. I might move on from email, but we can come back and have some questions later because we've got a few other applications to get through. So SharePoint is another one that is very common and very popular nowadays. So it's a very flexible tool. So you see some people use it as an intranet and use it for communication across their organization. Some people use it just for document storage, essentially replacing their file server. Some people use it for project management. Some people use it as a portal for each department where all their staff can log in and request leave and do things like that. So it's a very flexible and configurable tool. So probably the most common thing that it is used for among our clients, particularly smaller ones, is document storage. So you notice in my initial slide, you actually get two places you can store documents. So you can store OneDrive for Business, which is for each user, you get a OneDrive for Business account, which is 1 terabyte, and that synchronizes with offline files, and you can store that on your desktop as well. So a lot of users are doing that at the moment, where you store your working documents and drafts and those sort of things before you want to publish them to your team. So what we're usually recommending with SharePoint is that is where your teams have shared documents, so policies, procedures, team plans, those sort of things. And all people can work on the documents at the same time. There's good permissions and version history, and there's some really good functionality with both of these tools. Although one little bit of a warning, some of our clients are having issues at the moment with the synchronization. So while it's great that you can take files offline, so I work on files on a plane, for example, and then when I get back to my office and plug in the internet, they synchronize back up to SharePoint and all my team can see my changes. But at the moment, there's a few bugs with that sync where you can often get some synchronization issues if it's not done well or managed. So it's something to keep in mind before you launch too heavily into putting everything on SharePoint. All right, so really the things to think about with SharePoint is, what are you going to use it for? Is it really just for replacing your file server, or is it more a company-wide intranet? Look at your current systems and information. So we strongly recommend not just picking all the files up off your server and dumping them onto SharePoint. That's usually fraught with danger and ends in tears. So what we normally recommend is assess what you've currently got and what you're currently using, and go through a bit of an information architecture process to work out, okay, where are we going to store policies? Where are we going to store, working documents? What permissions need to happen on each of those documents? Who's going to view them? And where is best to store them? What's best stored in OneDrive? What's best stored in SharePoint? Those sort of discussion questions. And assign people to own the project. So again, it's not just your IT team. Often communications team or admin teams are the best people to get involved in this because they often own a lot of the documents. So again, change management is important because storing things on a shared SharePoint environment is quite different from storing your own documents on a USB stick or your desktop. So it's a bit of a culture change that you need to consider before you just jump in. All right. Again, I'll leave some time for SharePoint questions, and we've got a whole other webinar on SharePoint. And to be honest, we run full-day training sessions on SharePoint. So this was more just to get you thinking about using it, but it is a really great flexible tool that all size organisations are seeing some value out of. One of the other things that people are really loving is Skype for Business, and it's really easy to set up. So if you migrate your emails, you essentially can get Skype for Business set up without any additional cost or effort. So it used to be called Lync, so I know it's a little bit confusing, and it is different from Skype. So there are some integration between accounts, but Skype for Business is essentially a different product from the personal Skype that some of you are probably used to. It does rely on your internet connection. So if you're just doing instant messaging and the occasional video conference, ADSL for a small office of 10 people should be okay. But if you've got 50 people doing video conferences all day, every day, you're probably going to need a really high-end internet connection, sort of some fiber to help maintain the quality of the video. So just keep that in mind before you sort of commit heavily to Skype for Business. And often the headsets are important for audio. So just relying on your laptop speaker and often the audio results doesn't work that well. And if you're looking to set up your boardroom in a way that you can have big staff meetings remotely, just consider what equipment you're using, like what webcam you're using, what microphone you're using, what monitor people are looking at the screen on, those sort of things. And consider enable external contacts. So we've opened our Skype for Business up, so I send instant messages to a lot of my clients or a lot of other partner organisations. We're linked with Connecting Up, so I could send Sean an instant message after this saying, yep, great, thanks for today, here are my slides to send out to the group. So just consider that if there are other organisations that you work with that are using Office 365, it's good external communication as well. What's also good both for internal and external communication is Yammer. So Yammer, as I said before, is a bit like a Facebook for business. So it's private though, so it's specific to your organisation, and you can manage the content and you can manage permissions to that. So you can create groups for each team and topic to have their own discussions. You can also create multiple networks. So we are working with some clients who have a Yammer network for all their staff. It's like their internal discussion. They post, oh, the CEO's out here doing this today. Some other people post, oh, there's cake in the kitchen. Come and grab it for this person's birthday. Whereas they have a separate network where they talk with some of their clients or the parent groups or the board or committee members. So you can set up separate networks for separate purposes. You can add a feed in your SharePoint site, and for those who are already using Yammer, which is, you can actually get a free Yammer account without having Office 365. So if you've already got a Yammer platform, you can transfer it into Office 365 through Microsoft. So again, each organisation will use it differently, and we encourage you to engage your senior management team to use this as a way to post content and get rid of those all-staff emails that are often going out among a lot of organisations that we see. Mobility, I've touched on this already, but essentially there's now mobile apps for a lot of these applications. So you see there's a Yammer app, an Outlook Web Access app, a OneDrive app. They're ways that you can access it remotely, and particularly if you've got E3, you can install those good apps on up to 5 devices. For those who have a big mobile fleet or are looking at using iPads and phones heavily, there are 2 products that Microsoft have recently released called Mobile Device Management and Intune. So that's if you really want to start managing what's on people's iPads and you want to be able to remote wipe and put applications on and take them off and those sort of things. Maybe have a look at those. Intune is a paid service, so again you'd need to assess the value of that. So really the whole Office 365 is about assessing the value of moving. There may be a cost involved in moving across, even if the E1 licenses are free. There is a change, and it does change within an organisation is effort and money. So really you need to be able to sell this to your management and organisation and justify the change. A lot of organisations do that by saying, oh, well, we're due to replace our server in 6 months. We could go out and spend 10 grand or whatever it may be on a server, or we could just move to Office 365. Now, I'm not saying that Office 365 can replace everyone's servers. That really depends on what you're using your server for, but some organisations are able to do that. Other organisations are justifying the move by saving in travel. So we've seen some organisations that save thousands and thousands of dollars every year just by using video conferencing and allowing people to work from home using Skype for Business and SharePoint and those other things, instead of having to travel into the office, go interstate, those sort of things. Defending against hardware failure. So we've had lots of organisations that we've worked with that have forgotten to do backups, or they haven't changed the tapes and they've lost all their data. So this is really, even just from a risk management point of view, a lot of organisations can justify the move, really just to say, look, we're at risk now. If that server room floods or something like that, we're in big trouble. So we lose all our data, client data, we put our funding agreement at risk. So that's often another reason to move. And that collaboration and creating the single source of truth. So I don't know about you, but I've worked in organisations where we have a privacy policy, and you find the privacy policy stored in about 6 different locations, and they're all different versions. There's one on my desktop, there's one on the server, there's one on the company intranet, there's one on the CEO's computer. They're everywhere. Whereas if you're using SharePoint or something like that, you will store the policy or document once, and that's where it lives. So there's no more emailing documents around and editing them separately. It's having one spot. So there's some of the things that you can use, and you'll have your own ideas about what's important to your management team or board that will help you justify this. So these are a bit of a summary and some top 10 tips that we've found that organisations in the not-for-profit sector have really found beneficial and have worked the best in our migrations and implementations. So often it's about prioritising. So choosing 1 or 2 of the applications and doing them first and just getting people into it. Now, most organisations use email and Skype for Business first, although we had one recently that only wanted to use it for Yammer, and we had others that their priority is SharePoint project management, for example. But you will know what's best first, but we've seen that if you try and do everything at once, if you don't have to, it can often be too much change for everyone. Often it's about explaining the benefits to staff and helping engage them. So instead of it being a technical project of saying, here, we're doing these upgrades, we're rolling them out, you have to do it, it's more going around and actually engaging local staff and saying, hey, look, this Skype for Business tool, this is going to save you hours every week, and this is why it's beneficial to you, and get them to help engage, and they will be the ones that will be able to find the most relevant features to them. Number 3 there, make sure your bandwidth is suitable. So if it's just email, the bandwidth is probably not greatly different from what you're doing now if you're on an Exchange server. But as I said, if you start doing lots of video conferencing or syncing large libraries in SharePoint, it will chew up your bandwidth. So have a think about that. Consider upgrading Office. So as a minimum, we would recommend Office 2013, and that's what most of our clients are using now. But I know Connecting Up are selling now, if you buy from Connecting Up, it's Office 2016 is the latest version, and the clients that are using that haven't seen any issues with that. It's reasonably new still, but I would definitely consider upgrading. If you don't have really strong expertise internally, or your IT contractor hasn't done Office 365 before, I would just encourage using someone, even just for advice, to help you make the transition a success. Some people have got away with just giving it a go, but it can be a risky prospect when you're dealing with your company's intellectual property and information, and if your email goes down for a few days, I don't know about you, but I'd really struggle to operate if my emails were down for quite a while, or if I lost all my emails. Number 6, review your security controls and policies. So it's a good opportunity to say, okay, perhaps having a post-it note on your monitor with your password isn't the best idea. Let's come up with some other ways that will help you remember your password, and particularly now that Office 365 will make everyone have a more complex password, 8 characters with upper lowercase numbers, those sort of things, like most cloud-based systems do nowadays. Consider local storage. So as we said, some of you may not be able to get rid of your servers. So you may have large videos, large files, other applications, access databases, and those sort of things that you have locally. So you may still need a server or a NAS or some sort of local storage. Active Directory is good value for organisations. So often with organisations over sort of 30 staff, we tend to be recommending things like directory synchronization, which means it's the same username and password with your local server. So it's easier for staff to remember. That online collaboration spaces and Yammer are really great, and we've seen great benefits of bringing organisations together. So that is something that I would really strongly recommend. So I'm conscious that we've only got 6 minutes to go, so I'll make sure I save a few minutes for questions. But these are some of the ways that InfoExchange and other organisations are helping you in a cost-effective way to move to Office 365. So again, if you've got a local IT contractor, I'd speak to them about how they can help as well. But some of the things we're doing is a readiness assessment. So essentially, you can use one of our experts to give you some advice. So this is something just for $100 through Connecting Up. You essentially get a full report back saying this is how you should implement Office 365 based on your specific scenario. So we do a bit of an assessment of what all those boxes on that other slide where it was talking about, are you Exchange or Gmail, or are you large or small? Do you need directory synchronization or not? We'll do that assessment and give you a report that you can use to then take to your board, or do it yourself, or whatever you want to do with that. The other thing we're doing is do-it-yourself workshops. So there's another series starting in January. So if you're an IT person and you think you could have a crack yourself, we can support you through that with a series of online workshops. And look, there are additional webinars. So as I said, my colleague Stephanie does some SharePoint ones. Ryan's doing some introduction to Office 365. Next year we're going to be doing some more, a broader range. I think we're doing a Yammer one and some other ones next year that may be of interest. The other one is we're also actually doing migrations for people. So if you actually just want someone to come in and do it or give you some advice, InfoExchange can do that, both for email and SharePoint and Yammer and all of those other things. We also have a program where we're using volunteers to help Melbourne-based small organisations to do pretty basic migrations. So there's a few ways that you can migrate across. It's not a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. All right, so I'll skim through those and I will allow questions. So I'm happy to stay after 12, so again, we've got more than 3 minutes for anyone who wants it. I'm also happy to take emails or phone calls anytime, give you some free advice and have a further chat. So sorry if that was a little bit rushed, but I'll throw to you, Sean.
Great, thanks, Matt. We've had some questions come through, a couple around internet requirements for Office 365. You might have touched on them briefly before, but so John was just asking, yeah, are there any particular internet requirements for Office 365? And is there a limit to, say, the number of users that you can have? I think in John's case, it looks like they have about 25 staff, but can you potentially have up to hundreds on Office 365?
Yeah, so there was a couple of questions in there. So firstly, yes, you can have an unlimited number of staff in your Office 365 tenant using free E1 licenses. So as I said, we've got organisations with over 1,000 staff all using E1 free licenses. So that's that question. Internet bandwidth is one of those everyone's internet is different. As I said, it really depends what you're using it for. So if you're using purely, if you've got Exchange email now, or even Gmail or some sort of hosted email, and you move to Office 365 and just use email, it's probably going to be exactly the same. So there's still traffic going in and out. However, if you, as part of that move to Office 365, start syncing your SharePoint libraries so that you can have them offline, that uses up data. If you start using video conferencing, that uses up data. So for 25 people, you might be able to get away with an ADSL2 style connection if you're just using email and really sort of light requirements. However, anyone with, let's say, over 50, you're probably going to need to look at upgrading to a symmetrical connection. So ADSL, for example, you might have 10 meg upload and 0.9 meg download. Sorry, the other way. So 12 meg download and 0.9 upload is quite common. What we'd recommend is you increase your upload speed to have 10 or 20 meg upload and download. So that allows that more symmetrical connection to access all these applications. Now that cost will depend on where you are. So Metro Melbourne, you can get a 20 meg Ethernet or fibre connection for maybe 300 a month. We've got some clients in regional areas that's thousands a month. So it really does depend on your specific location, how far you are from the exchange. So talk to your local IT provider, do a speed test, speedtest.net. But if it's just email, you can try it and give it a go.
Great, thanks, Matt. Our next question from Michael, it comes in a couple of parts, so I'll break it down. And the first bit is about document storage in Office 365, and just wondering, does that have an Active Directory type security whereby users are members of groups and have access to folders, subfolders, etc.?
Yes, that's right. On SharePoint, you can set, and we always recommend that you set, security and permissions on your SharePoint libraries. So Office 365 has an inbuilt security. You can create security groups in Office 365, and we recommend that you use those for SharePoint. So put different departments or security levels, and when you're setting up your SharePoint library, you just essentially go assign permissions to Group A or Group B. It can also pull from if you've got a local Active Directory that's synchronized, you can pull from your local Active Directory as well. So the answer to that was yes. You can set permissions at a site level in SharePoint, a library level, a folder level, and you can also set permissions at a document level. Now it gets very messy if you do that, so we typically don't recommend that. We recommend that you set up sites. So for example, most of our clients have a board site, and you set the security, just the board site can access that, and maybe the CEO, and then you have a staff area, and maybe you also have a HR area where you store your HR files that has different permissions as well.
Thanks, Matt. And so next part of it was just, so assuming this is a built-in backup service, what is the retention period for the files that are stored?
Blind files and store them locally if you like. The retention periods I mentioned before were when you delete things, there are several layers of recycle bin that each have their own time frames of how long they stay in those recycle bins. Now I think overall it's 180 days off the top of the head that you can get files back. Either from the user can get them back for a period, then your administrator can get them back for a period, and then Microsoft can get them back for you for a period. So, but that's only if you delete them.
Thank you, Matt. Our next question is from Michael, who asks, is it possible to have some users from the same organization on E1 and the E1 plan, and other users on E3?
Yes, and that's very common. So yes, you essentially for each user you assign a license. So those who don't need Office, for example, we always recommend E1, and others for E3, yes.
Thank you, Matt. And next question is from Desiree, who asks, are there any minimum spec requirements for PC and laptops when implementing Office 365?
Yes, and it again depends on how you're using it. If you're just using a web browser, it's a little bit different. So you basically need IE 10, and I think any version of Chrome works. IE 11 is recommended at this stage. So if you're just using webmail or accessing sort of some high-level information or Yammer or an intranet on a web browser, that's what we recommend. But if you're using Outlook and you're doing a lot of synchronizing and you're synchronizing SharePoint libraries and you're using Skype for Business, we'd recommend an i5 with 4 gig of RAM. So again, it doesn't have to be that highly spec. As I said, we can also work on, you can work on tablets and Macs as well. You just need different applications for them.
Thanks, Matt. Our next question is from John, who asks, is the mail-in exchange online virus scanned by Microsoft before it hits a user mail block?
Yeah, so there's a product called Microsoft Online Protection that is inbuilt in Office 365 that does a pretty good job of scanning viruses and spam and those sort of things. So the majority of our clients don't also have additional spam filters. Some of you may choose, and a couple of large organisations I know that already had spam filters have kept them in place because they serve some additional functionality, but 90% of our clients are happy with the inbuilt virus protection and online protection and spam that you get through Office 365.
Thank you, Matt. Our next question is from Gary, who asks, can I add a disclaimer message on outgoing emails in Office 365?
It depends what you mean by disclaimer message. So you can just put if you're just referring to default, like privacy policy or something like that, on the bottom of everyone's email, yes, you can. You can just go and do that through the admin portal. What it doesn't do, it's not very good at that really complex signature. If you're wanting to do things like dynamic signatures and putting images and those sort of things in, you would need to get a third-party application for that sort of function. But if you're just doing a across-the-board privacy policy, yep, it can do that.
Cool. Thank you, Matt. And I think this be a final question, looks like a final question, from Solomon, who's just inquiring about blocking a spam email domain. Would you recommend sending an email to Microsoft support, and if so, what would be the lead time for that?
So yeah, there's a little bit to that question. So as far as spam filtering across a whole domain, what we found is the Microsoft spam filter actually does most of that for you. Like just by default, it blocks most domains that you would typically want to block. So what we're finding is you don't usually need to do that. But this could be one of the more complex things. If you really wanted to get that advanced spam sort of filtering around specific content and specific domain blocking, you may consider a third-party spam filter. You can, put in requests with Microsoft. We find Microsoft, can be good at some of those support requests, and anyone with an Office 365 account can log requests directly to Microsoft. So that is a benefit, I suppose, of having Office 365. You do have a help desk that you can access. So happy to speak to Solomon offline if there's a bit more to that.
Great, thanks, Matt. And it looks like we've had one more question come through, if you've got time to answer it. So this one is from...
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So this one just from Tim. Just wondering, is there any concern really if so organisation can start out on the free E1 plan and then it being switched to a charge service when they're already perhaps locked in, so to speak?
I'm not sure what you mean by charge service, but you can change your plans reasonably easy. So if you migrate to E1, you can then move to E3 reasonably easily. So if you've already got copies of Office that maybe you don't want to upgrade yet, you could move to E1, and then in 6 months' time, then you could upgrade everyone to E3 and give them all Office 2016. So if that was the question, then yes, you can easily upgrade.
Great, thanks, Matt. Hopefully that clarifies the question there. I think also he's just sent through a sort of follow-up into just now. I'm wondering, can you predict in 5 years' time, say, do you think the E1 plan would still be a free?
All the indications we have from Microsoft is that they're very committed to the not-for-profit sector. So I would expect so, and we've also had indications that they're exploring what else they can offer free to the not-for-profit sector. So I think if anything, the amount that's free will grow to the not-for-profit sector across different application lines. That'd be my guess. Don't hold me to that. What I would also predict is that the paid features in E3 will continue to improve. So like any organization, I would guess that they're going to do more and more to encourage people to upgrade to paid plans. So the better that E3 gets, the more organizations are going to sit back and think, well, actually, $6.38 a month is still good value, and it's a quarter of the price corporates are paying, and you get all this additional functionality. I'm actually going to upgrade to the $6.38 a month to E3 to get all this great other business intelligence and all these other features and functions. So if anything, I think they'll keep E1 the same and improve the paid plans to be more motivating for people to upgrade. Is my guess. Again, don't hold me to that, please.
Thanks, Matt. So it looks as though that's our questions for today. So thanks everybody for sending them through and for also sticking around to listen to the discussion at the end. So I think we might wrap it up if that's all right with you, Matt, for this morning.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
So again, thanks everyone. Sorry we went a little bit over time. So again, feel free to, there's my email address there. Feel free to give us a call, drop me an email anytime if you didn't get your questions answered or if there's anything we can help with. And hopefully we might even see some of you in our DIY workshops or in assessments. So good luck with it.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And so thanks very much for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining. And as we mentioned, a link to a recording of the webinar and a copy of the slides will be sent to you all very shortly. So please keep a lookout in your inbox. And as Matt said, he's happy to continue the discussion afterwards if you've had any questions, any more questions. So you can send them through directly to mwalton@infoexchange.org or just send them through to events@connectingup.org and we can pass them on. And so as always, don't forget to check out our website, newsletters, Facebook and Twitter for all the latest events, info and more. So thanks again everyone for joining and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, John.